Hey everyone, hello and welcome to another session of Mobile UX Marathon. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have another interesting session lined up for you guys. Very quickly, just setting Mobile UX Marathon is a weekly webinar targeted towards sharing insights on how you can improve your user experience and conversion rate. It is a marathon, and we are on our 4th week of our marathon. So we've had 3 sessions already every Tuesday. So in case you missed any one of those sessions, please visit our Conversions channel on YouTube, and you'll be able to see the recorded versions of of our previous webinars. The marathon is going to, like I said, is going to be there for 6 weeks, and we are on week 4. And these were the sessions that we had previously. So we started with UX beyond the click and why it matters, best practices on UX, and last week we did conversion rate optimization. And today we are going to dive deeper into UX insights using Google Analytics. A lot of you guys use Google Analytics as your primary tool for managing the user experience and managing data and analytics. And we wanted to take you through how you can leverage the power of Google Analytics, right? We've had the pre-recorded video that we had uploaded on the channel. So hopefully you guys have gone through that. If not, we'll do a quick review of the video before we go further into today's session. This session will probably will last around 45 minutes to 50 minutes. And at the end of the live stream, we will share a feedback with you guys in the next couple of days. So please ensure that you are giving us feedback, because feedback is important to improve the quality of the sessions going forward. Apart from that, in case you guys are sharing any learnings or sharing any material on social media, please use the hashtag #MUXMarathon on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, anywhere you want to use. We will also answer Q&As that you guys have pre-submitted through the landing page. So just quickly, in case you guys have not registered, please register yourself at events with google.com/mobileUXMarathon. It is important to register because you will get timely alerts, and you will also get the feedback form that you could share, where you can share your feedback with, right? And like I was saying, that we will try and answer all the Q&As, all the questions that you guys have raised to us through the landing page. And in case you guys get any questions during the live stream, please make use of the live comment section on YouTube, and we'll try and answer any questions that you might have at the end of the session. Today, as I said, we have a very, very interesting. Sorry about that. Today we have a very interesting session lined up, and we have joining with us to you guys for a quick introduction. Michelle, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Michel. I'm a measurement specialist for Google in Southeast Asia. I've been at Google 13 years. So that's me.
And I'm Brian. I'm an analytics and attribution technical specialist. I'm based in Sydney, and I've been with Google now 6 years.
Cool. So let's go to the next slide. I think we'll talk you through the agenda for today. So we've just done the welcoming back. Brian is going to take you through a quick recap of the GA for UX video that was shared before this session. I'll talk you through some of the measurement challenges that we see when we talk to Google clients. Then we'll present a nice framework for you to create both a measurement plan, but also to put to place the organization that you work for or with on a maturity curve. Then Brian will take you through a live exercise where he will show you how you can build a UX dashboard for mobile. I'll talk you through an interesting case study for Schuh. a European client that does e-commerce, and that did a whole redesign of their website and shared some interesting learnings on our conversions event in Dublin. And then Brian will quickly take you through some best practice recommendations before we head into the Q&A. So with that, if we can go next slide, I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Yep. So I just want to spend about 5 minutes reviewing what we saw in the pre-recorded video. So the first step in your UX measurement journey should be to start with the all pages report, the device report, the audience, and the funnel report. Each of these will help you get a feel for where your site is operating today and what areas you might want to focus on for improvement. After that, you can begin to develop an idea of additional metrics that you may want to start tracking and which KPIs that you want to start focusing on to define success for your business. The funnel report is only available to those with enhanced e-commerce enabled, and that will allow us to find and investigate leakages in the purchase funnel. The next slide. So what should we prioritize first? So we first used the all pages report, where we calculated the most valuable pages by multiplying the page views by the page value. And then we broke these down into segments to separate mobile from desktop to see if there were any pages that were highly valuable on desktop but not performing as well as we want them to on mobile. We then mentioned that if you're not using e-commerce pages, you can use time on page or bounce rate to approximate a value of a page. Typically, we do see higher bounce rates on mobile, but you can compare these rates on a page-by-page basis to desktop. That way you can see where the largest discrepancies are and where you have room for improvement. Next, we use the screen resolutions report to understand the distribution of your users across different screen resolutions. This will help you determine which screen resolutions you should prioritize for testing. And you can compare the page value and bounce rate by screen resolution so that you can just see if there are any red flags. Next slide. So next we talked about what happens when your users enter your site. So sorry, I moved my notes. So once we've prioritized which dimensions that we want to focus on, we're going to try to understand what the behaviors of your customers on your page. So you're going to want to look at your page through the eyes of a user and at least go through the purchase funnel. I would do it at least once a month so that you can see what your users are actually seeing on mobile when they try to go through your site. We looked at the landing pages report and segmented that traffic by source to determine that if any particular source of traffic is behaving better or worse than another. Next, we looked at the site search usage report to quantify the impact of the site search bar on the overall revenue of your site. We typically see that site search usage has a large impact on your conversion rate. So if that is true for your site, you might want to consider making sure that the search bar is easy to find and usable for all users. On top of that, we can look at the search terms report to see what your customers are most often searching for on your site. And that will go hand in hand with the all pages report with content groupings. The two of these will let you see which search terms and which categories are the most valuable. Finally, we use the top events report to analyze the differences in your new and your returning users, because returning users are more familiar with your site. They usually have a more higher conversion rate, and they may skip different sections of your site. They may use your search bar to jump ahead in this purchase funnel. So perhaps it's worth looking into, could these users benefit from a more customized experience so that they can streamline conversions. The next slide. So finally, we spoke about where we should focus on in the funnel. So the report there that we viewed was the e-commerce shopping behavior report. So that allows you to segment data by desktop and mobile so that you can highlight underperforming pages by device and see where users are getting stuck in your purchase funnel and dropping out. So the best way to look at that data is to use some of your own intuition and then use data to test and confirm your own beliefs. When users come to your site but they never visit a product page, what are they doing? Are they coming there for research? Do they have another agenda? Does your website cater to that agenda? And are you measuring these types of users? What about the users who view a product but then never add anything to the cart? Are they expecting something different? Did they want a product in another color? Should you perhaps provide a feedback form so that they could request another color? And where do some of these users come from? How do they get to your site? Are they coming from media, from an affiliate, from search? What about users who add things to the cart but they never check out? Has something changed their mind? Can you encourage them to return with remarketing? Can you provide a great return experience so that the contents of their shopping cart are still available when they come back? For users who maybe try to check out, but there's no transaction, could there have been a problem with the payment processing? Are there too many pages in the checkout step that frustrates them? We see this a lot with travel companies. Do you ask for information that the clients don't have readily available, a passport number or something? So now that we've reviewed everything from the pre-video, I will pass you over to Mikhail.
Cool, next slide. Right, so once you set off on this journey, right, and you are you have defined a UX challenge or UX project, the key thing to do, and the first thing you should be doing is to agree on the core metrics that matter. And I think you shouldn't underestimate the importance of this. We've put some metrics here on the slide. There's e-commerce metrics like sales or conversion rate, customer acquisition costs, all of which are important, but all of which will matter predominantly to a certain group of stakeholders, right? The stakeholders that will be responsible for an overall result, right? Whereas your marketing team might have very different goals in mind, right? They might be prejudiced towards a certain channel or a certain group of channel that they would like to see perform well. They might have a secondary target based on new user acquisition, for example, on the share for mobile traffic. They might have goals in terms of keeping CPC lower. So it's important to understand those. And then the third group of metrics basically belongs to your webmaster or to whomever, to your IT department managing your site, right? They might care disproportionately about page speed or returning users or the pages per session. The point I'm trying to make is there's different stakeholders with different KPIs. So what is important is that you as a as a UX professional put down a very, very clear metric that you will judge by, and you can agree with your stakeholders on secondary metrics, but communicate these well and get buy-in is the message. So next slide. And that is because even when that happens, and even when we have agreed on what the core metric is and what the secondary metrics are, I think same data set, different people will see different things, right? And it depends a little bit in terms of how far your organization is along that journey, and how what the understanding is of statistics in for the different stakeholders. But people tend to see different things in the same data set. So yeah, make sure you agree well in advance. Next slide. So one other unconscious bias almost is that people, our human brain will try to will try to prove what we already thought, and this is very very normal. It's not just applicable to I think UX, but applicable to a lot of different forms of testing. I think the core thing, the core message here is that it is important that we celebrate both our successes and our failures, and that when we're very passionate about a certain product feature or a certain message on the page, that we still test it, along with other alternatives that maybe we haven't come up with ourselves, or maybe somebody else came up with. Just make sure you eliminate bias, and I think that is at the core of testing. We no longer implement the idea of what Google, we call this the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. We no longer implement that idea, but we test a few different ideas and see what works best. Next slide. So there are a lot of challenges, right? And I'm sure lots of you will have heard this. And I think when we talk to our clients, so the research challenges that we get are pretty standard. It's too expensive. It costs too much time. We're not sure it's really going to give us much. Or perhaps there is a problem in the organization around how to conduct, how to analyze those researches, or maybe how to interpret it, what to do with the findings. So if you go to the next slide, a big part of the challenges that you will have to face as a UX researcher is actually not related to UX, right? Try to figure out in advance sort of who cares about UX in your organization. Make sure that they that you connect with them, make sure that you understand what drives them, find out who talks to who, and how people tend to, or how people want to make those insights actionable. And I think if I have to give you a bit of a guideline in terms of how much time should you spend on what, then we would say that roughly spend 60% of your time around any UX redesign projects on stakeholder management. And it might sound like a lot, but it could save you a lot of time going forward. A few things around that you could do, right, is you could build a team of internal allies. You could create a framework for user research and get buy-in on that. You could when you launch new prototypes of any change, directly connect it to that user research, and do the communication around that. And when you do launch something, build a proof of concept around the launch that you've done. So next slide. So now we're going to talk a little bit around, how do I move my organization forward? So if you go next slide, we're going to start very simple around sort of a measurement plan, and this this might be a little bit too simple, but we just wanted to get something up. So that we could run you through an example, right? So here, for let's say this is the measurement plan. On your right is the increase of mobile UX, right? The goal would be to improve the mobile conversion rate, right? The KPI would be your conversion rate metric that you're going to judge that by, right? The target would be an increase in conversion rate of X%. And then you want to segment that out, right? So you want to segment it for pure e-commerce, and maybe there are some micro conversions as well that it'd be worth segmenting out. Great. Okay, so this is quite basic, right? I think we all get this, but we have we've developed a CRO maturity overview as well. If you go to the next slide, next slide, next slide, please. Then you'll see you'll basically see the model here, right? And we have 4 types of businesses, right? Nascent, which is sort of at the early stages, emerging, so it's there a little bit further, then connected, which is pretty far, and multi-moment, right? Multi-moment would be the organizations that you know, are really advanced in terms of how they use data. And the latest research I've seen is it's roughly it's only a few % of businesses out there, whereas the vast majority sits in 2 and 3. You know, if we just go through the maturity model quickly, because it is a very useful framework. You know, for the resources, we're basically you know, you basically map out what are the resources that you have, right? What are literally the number of people that are involved in conversion rate optimization within that business. On knowledge is, you know, where does knowledge sit on conversion rate optimization in the business? Do the resources have that required knowledge, right? I mean, we often see with you know, organizations that are at the beginning of this journey that tends to sit with the marketing team, whereas people that are further ahead will have specific pockets of knowledge, right? So some people might be experts in UX and UX design. There will be people experts that will be experts in Google Analytics, and I think the latest part of that is where you have you know, fully dedicated experts. Process, you know, are the processes around doing UX tests, are they well known? Are they followed? You know, or are they non-existent, right? The insight methods. You know, how much time is dedicated to research, and how much you know, how much time and how much money probably. You know, whereas it's very ad hoc for the nascent companies, but the companies that are well advanced might actually have user testing labs, right? They do a lot of qualitative and quantitative research, and they actually act upon that insight as well. You know, strategy, right? The strategy is the strategy clearly defined and broken out for different user pain points. Tools, you know, I don't think I have to explain that. You know, basic analytics for the nascent business, and a lot of subscriptions around, you know, personalization, around CRO for the more advanced businesses. And then the C-level mindset, which is also really, really important. Are they bought into this work? Do they understand the importance of its success? And do they actively steer for a user-focused business? So if you go to the next slide, I think I've talked through this, right? Knowledge. So next slide, inside, yeah, to next slide. So yeah, then for the big questions, I'm going to hand it back over to Brian.
Yeah, so if you can go ahead and pin me, I'm getting ready to do the live demo of the dashboarding. This slide pretty much speaks for itself. There's so many metrics available. It's sort of up to you and your business which ones are most important to you. But I'm going to show you a quick demo in Google Analytics on how to build a dashboard so that you can focus on the metrics that you care about and return and see them easily. So can you go ahead and pin me, and I will jump to the live demo dashboard. So this is just the Google Analytics page, starting with the Google Merchandise Store. It's pretty much a test account. So while it is running live on the real Google Merchandise Store, and we do have 10 active users right now, the data is not as clean as we'd like it to be. So there will be some filters that I put in just because I know that not all of the data has been cleaned up as well as we'd like. So the first step in creating a dashboard is we're going to go to customization, and then dashboards, and then we're just going to create a new dashboard. So I'm going to start with a blank canvas, and we can call it my so a lot of the actions in analytics take a second to get pre-populated. Just got to wait on the blue bar. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a widget. I usually ignore the title because it'll create one for you. So I'm going to start with a table. And in here, I'm going to choose the default channel grouping, users, and transactions. So I'm going to add a dimension. So this default channel grouping, it's Google's estimate of what your traffic sources are. You can customize and create your own channel groupings as you need. And so we want to see users, and transactions. I'm going to start with just 10 rows and really no filter on this one. So once you push save, this will populate the table. So typically when you start, you're only going to have this all users segment. But because we're mostly interested in mobile traffic, once that populates back again. So these are the number of users who came to the site in the last, so from April 1st to May 25th, and the number of transactions from those users. So the first thing that I noticed is the referral channel, while having nearly as many users as direct, has got a lot more conversions. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to add a segment for mobile users so that we can see how all users compare to mobile traffic. So once I apply that, we'll be able to see the two data sets side by side. So one thing that I'm going to point out here in a second when this loads is this is going to be sorted by which channel has the most users from the all users category. But because we want to focus on mobile, I'd rather see which channels are sending the most mobile traffic to the site and then compare that to the all users data. So we do that just by dragging mobile traffic to the left. So here we see that the majority of your mobile users are coming from organic search, and then you can just calculate these percentages and values based on your number of users and transactions. Additionally, we can't do it here, but because I don't have admin access to this account, but within your admin panel, you can create calculated metrics so that you could do that multiplication for you and add it to the table. So if I wanted to change transactions to revenue, we could do that as well. It's really easy to update the table. So we'll just come in here and say revenue. Wait for it to populate and save. And now you can calculate value by channel as well. So we're still sorted by users because that's the first of the two dimensions that we've added. We can then reverse these if we'd rather see these sorted by revenue. So the next one I'm going to do is time on page. So a lot of times for mobile, we care about how long are people spending on our page before they move on to the next page. So here I'm going to create another table. I'm going to add the page metric. Sorry, table. And here's where I'm going to add a filter to this data just because I know that the URL parameters weren't cleaned up how they should have been. So here we're going to add page again. Just so that the data sort of looks better, I'm going to say I only care about pages that end with / without the URL parameters. So for metrics, we care about average time on page, and we're going to want to compare that with page views. So here I have this sorted so that we're seeing which pages have the most time on the page. So when I push save, we're now going to get a second table here. And a lot of these aspects are customizable. So I can drag this over here to the second column. You can change the width and the numbers of the columns as you see fit. So here we're seeing that the return policy page has 166 page views and the most time spent on page from mobile users as well as all users. So you can start to get a feel for how much difference are people spending on certain pages in time, and you can see the page views beside that, so you see if it's worth noting. So 31,000 views at 38 seconds on the landing page seems more significant than a minute and a half on frequently asked questions, but only 500 users. You can also customize the number of elements in here. If I want to focus on the pages that are viewed the most, I can then just edit this table and say clone widget. Which should give me a second table down here. So now when I edit this one, we can now switch the page views first. And we put average time on page second. So my columns aren't the same width, but now that we can see these side by side, we can see that for pages that have the most views, the landing page, 38 seconds versus all users is 59 seconds. So they're spending less time on the landing page on mobile than they are overall. So this just gives you a better idea of which pages have the most mobile traffic and how long are people spending on each of those pages. I'm conscious of time, so I'm probably just going to do one more example. Another interesting one I like is revenue on a timeline. So if we create a new widget, actually maybe I'll do two more examples. There's one other thing I want to make sure we highlight. So I just wanted to show the different types of reports that you can put in this. So this would be a timeline that shows you how your revenue looks over time. We shrink this to 2 weeks rather than the full month. You kind of get a better picture of the last 2, because this table is just so small right now. So here we can see that our mobile revenue is very low compared to our all revenue. So ideally, you would monitor this table over time, and as one of our key metrics that we wanted to monitor was increase the mobile percentage of revenue, we would hope to see this blue line move closer to the middle of the orange line. So we get to a 50-50 split. So next, I'm going to try a bar chart. We can do transactions. If we group these by the default channel grouping again, that might have gone too fast. Nope, back in both. And just because I know that we have more channels than 5, I'll add 9. I'm going to go back to the 2-column layout. So let's just do 100. So we can get a better visual view of these. So here we can see by channel the differences between all users transactions and mobile transactions. So it's not a very good picture for our site, it looks like. Almost none of our transactions are coming from mobile. So that's another report that you could use to monitor to see if you're improving your mobile conversion rates. So the next section I wanted to go ahead and cover is if we remove this segment from the report, you can then add device category as a dimension. So we'll add a new widget, we'll go to table. It's just another way to look at some of the same data. We add device category. We will also add users and users and transactions. So this gives you a breakdown of how many users that you have for each device category and the number of transactions. So in the last 2 weeks, we've only had 36 mobile transactions, but 76,000 users. So this is another one where I would want to use the admin panel to create a calculated metric to divide transactions by number of users to see how many transactions you have on average per user, or vice versa. With that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Mikhail.
Cool. So well, I'm going to talk you through the case study. So if we go to the next slide, our case study is on Schuh. Schuh is a challenger brand. They sell, unsurprisingly, shoes. And a year or 2.5 ago, I think, their main competitor did a full rebrand of their site, and they had already collected some user feedback. Apparently, an increasing number of users mentioned that their site didn't really look cool. And at one point, Stuart was told by his management that they were going to do a full redesign of the entire site. So panic kicks in. And basically, what Stuart does, the first thing he does, which he does well, is talk to all stakeholders in the business and define a clear hypothesis. So the hypothesis that he defined was that the new site should not have a lower conversion rate than the current site, right? So conversion rate was selected as the main metric to measure the goal. The video, by the way, is on YouTube. So if you look for Stuart McMillan conversions at Google 2018, you can watch the full video. It's an enjoyable experience, and he shares all of the lessons basically that he's learned in that process. So if you go to the next slide. One of the things I thought was very, very interesting was around sort of the communication and what they've done, which we would always recommend, is when you launch big redesigns, you don't just switch one side for the other and hope for the best, right? You slowly introduce elements, you collect user feedback, qualitative and quantitative, and you start measuring, right? What's the effect of this new feature of this new section on conversion rate? And when they started doing that, they started sending out very, very detailed communications inside their organization, and the communications were somewhere along the lines of what you see here. And immediately all hell broke loose, and it's quite entertaining how Stuart describes that. But his one of his key lessons, if you go to the next slide, was around when you collect this data, was around communication, right? And if you go next slide, the way they chose to communicate that after all hell broke loose was to just simplify it and report on the primary metric solely. So instead of giving everybody constantly updates on how things were going, they really try to regroup and keep their sanity and report one basic metric on how the core metric that everybody had bought into and agreed to had done, and they changed the communication to what you see on the right. So they're literally saying, hey, on mobile we're about as good as we were, and we're sure about that, right? There's 95% confidence level, and on desktop we're a little bit better. So don't worry, relax. Let us do our job. So yeah, have a look at that video. It's definitely recommendable to watch it. It's fun, and yeah, the lessons learned are very interesting. So yeah, next slide. So handing it back to Brian for some best practices and recommendations.
Sure. Can we go on to the next slide? So just a small collection of some tips and best practices that we've seen. So it's definitely worth building out the top reports that you want to use regularly into a customized mobile first dashboard. Actually, I'm going to skip down to the bottom one for this. So along with that, I would set up a separate analytics view specifically for your UX team. So different teams are going to have different metrics that they care about, and your marketing team may want to look at one set of KPIs and track one set of metrics. Your product sales team may care about different aspects, and for sure your UX team cares about other aspects. You may have event tracking on certain buttons. You may want to treat your search bar as a micro conversion is something that you want to improve on. So if you have your own separate analytics view, you can set up your own types of filters, and you can build all of your own reports, and you have your own sort of playground to manage your own data for your team. So next, we want to identify all of the data gaps. So like I was saying, what are the micro conversions and the macro conversions that the UX team cares about? Do you care about page scroll depth? Do you care about time on page? Ultimately, revenue and conversions. And when was the last time you actually got out a mobile phone and you went to your website and tried to make a purchase? When you do this, you're easily going to notice opportunities for improvement, things that annoy you about your own website, and try it on someone else's phone, one that you're not familiar with, has a different screen size and resolution. And I think as you do that, you're going to be surprised at what you find out. And finally, I'm going to go down to number 3, combining the data and the insights. So you know your business better than anyone else. So you're going to have a feel for, once you've gone through your own mobile site, what are people expecting when they come to your page? Do you have an informational type page where they're coming to do research about different products or medications or anything that they're mostly there for research? Or are you an online store where they're expecting to order products and have them delivered to their house? So you're going to kind of be able to use your own intuition and then use the data to help prove or otherwise whether or not those intuitions are correct. And how can you use the existing data to set up an A/B test? That one's going to be covered more in the next session in the series. So I'm going to just leave that one be for now. Do you want to move to the next slide? I think we're into questions. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for that. So with that, we'll jump into the Q&As. And as I mentioned earlier, so we'll be taking a few questions that you guys had submitted earlier. At the same time, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to use the live comments. Matthew is helping you guys over there. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. In the meantime, we can take a couple of asked questions. So the first question was, essentially around more about user journey. So the question is, can you tell us more about the user journeys that you see for key products, especially like travel and finance, and what role does mobile play in that journey? And how many digital touch points do you think that are possible to occur before a conversion event? Mikhail, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I think for finance, I mean, a customer journey can be very long, right? I mean, if you're buying a mortgage, you would want to basically do your research, right? Because it's a big purchase. I think if you're looking for a credit card, it's probably a little bit smaller in terms of the number of touch points. But I would still say, for both of those scenarios, there will be multiple touch points. Having said that, I think mobile plays a bigger role in the discovery than in conversion, right? Which is why we're seeing conversion rates on mobile tend to be a little bit lower. So one of the things we would usually recommend our finance clients is to set up micro conversions on mobile. This could be as simple as capturing email or a sign up, or maybe booking an appointment, and then have make it easy for people to whatever they've learned to later on finish that within a desktop site. I mean, for travel, we know that looking for a holiday, it could have anywhere up to 30, 40, 50 touch points, right? I mean, people care about where they go on holiday. So the same goes there. I mean, mobile would play a bigger role in discovery. So try to capture interest, try to make it easy for people to save a specific holiday, save a specific destination, share a destination with their loved ones, right? they're very likely not to make that decision by themselves. And I think those sort of micro conversions can really assist conversions on other devices. We've also launched a cross-device report in Google Analytics. So we have, if you enable Google Signals, Google Analytics signals, then Google Analytics will use Google data to connect user journeys across devices and report on that within the GA interface. So yeah, I'm not sure, Brian, do you have anything to add on that? Okay, do we go to the next question?
From an attribution standpoint, when you start to use data-driven attribution, this is going to really help shed some light onto this. You'll be able to see, depending on what touch points are in the path to conversion, so which ads were seen, which were clicked on, and how much credit they actually deserve. So that, along with the Google Signals, are the two ways that I would start to look into these paths to conversions.
Thank you so much, guys. So moving on to the next question, it's more about what are the KPIs and how do we essentially set a goal for a visual design element. Now, this could be a button, this could be a form, some things that are not, some things that could also be a subjective choice. So Brian, would you like to take this?
Yeah. So this one's going to get a little bit more into the coding part of your site, unless you're using Google Tag Manager. But what you're going to want to set up are different event tracking, and it will send event hits to Google Analytics so that you can measure button clicks or scroll depth on a page, interactions with your search bar, play button on a video. There's almost an unlimited number of event tracking that you can set up for your site. And once you begin tracking these different interactions with the site, you can then start it. Once you started measure them, you're going to want to set up an A/B test. Say, does my blue button perform better than my green button? So put 50-50 split on the two buttons, and which one's going to get clicked more. That is how I would set up a KPI and measure and design for success.
Thanks, Michael. I think it also goes back to what you guys were saying in the earlier in the session in terms about also looking at micro conversions and not really relying on the macro conversions, right? So especially when it is a visual element, I think a lot of micro interactions and micro conversions is where you'll get bulk of your insights on. So moving on to the next question, it's more about as a designer or as even as a product manager, what is the best way to learn about Google Analytics more and analytics in general? So how does one develop a better understanding about GA? Michelle, I think, sorry, Brian.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So we can add a link to this slide before we send it out. But if you do a Google search for Analytics Academy, there are 4 different training courses that we have, online videos. I believe they're each like 4 to 8 chapters long, and they start from the very basics of Google Analytics all the way to advanced and power users and GA360. And there's a couple of different training sessions there for Google Tag Manager and even Data Studio for building custom data dashboards off of your analytics data.
All right, cool. That sounds good. Cool. So another pre-submitted question. So this is about, and I know, Michelle, you covered a little bit of this in your session, but it is about who essentially leads the product analytics project, right? So who should be accountable for monitoring? Because the data and business can have multiple stakeholders. You can have UI, you can have UX, you can have business, you can have product, you can have marketing. So how do you essentially come up with something, and how do you really track this analytics project?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I think it makes sense to do a full sort of stakeholder mapping. Who should be involved, who has an interest, and make sure that you map out the KPIs that people care about. Then depending on what the maturity is of your organization, it might be a product manager that leads on this and that suggests different elements to test. And perhaps he runs the tests himself as well if the company is quite nascent. If the company has more, is further in that journey, there might be other teams involved in terms of designers, in terms of data analysts, or GA experts that could actually help with the design methodology and with coming to a conclusion. So it fully depends on where your company sits in that journey. But in general, I think over communicate and make sure all stakeholders are involved.
Sure, thanks, Michelle. So actually, as I think you mentioned that 60% of your time should be allocated for internal process management and internal stakeholder management, and I think a lot of this aligns with that as well in terms of ensuring that your team is aligned, there is proper communication channel set up. Sorry about that. And then we'll take one last pre-submitted question before we go on to the live questions. So this is essentially to do with bounce rate and how different kind of traffic sort of impacts your bounce rate. So let's say a marketing campaign is running, which brings in a lot of traffic, the high level traffic onto the site, but it is not converting very well, right? So how do you manage generally bounce rate variability? Brian, Michelle, who would like to take this?
You want that one, Mikael?
So there's the great thing about analytics is the segments, right? And I think when you see a high bounce rate on a specific landing page, the first thing you want to do is segment it by traffic source, right? If you segment it by traffic source and you immediately answer the question, does one traffic source have a significantly higher bounce rate than another traffic source, right? And if that's the case, you might want to explore the root of the marketing problem. If that's not the case, it's more likely to be the site or the landing page. In which case you could compare it to other similar landing pages and let's try to see if is there a problem in site speed? Is there elements that aren't rendering? Can we segment perhaps by screen resolution? Right? Is this page not functioning for specific screen resolutions or for specific devices? And try to drill down to the problem. But it's you follow your intuition in terms of trying to tackling one course route, and then move on to the next until you find out the elements that are responsible. Brian, anything to add?
A couple, yeah. So I would also look at which browsers your users are using. Do you have a higher bounce rate in one browser or another? And when you mention segment it by traffic source, one of those traffic source is going to be direct navigation. So if you already have good brand awareness and penetration, if users who already know your website, if they type in and directly navigate to your page but immediately bounce, then that's a key indication to me that there's a site problem and not a brand awareness problem, because they clearly were intentionally coming to your page, but then got there and for some reason they wanted nothing more to do with it and left.
All right, cool. I hope you guys found that interesting. So with that, we'll jump to the live questions. And the first question, is asked by Gaurav Singh. And essentially the question is, how do I use Google Analytics to benchmark my conversion rates against industry benchmarks? maybe Brian or Michelle, one of you guys can take this. So the question is around, how do I set up industry benchmarks and how do I compare my conversion rate with industry benchmark?
So within from the pre-recorded video, there's a section in there talking about the benchmarking reports within Google Analytics. From within there, they also cautioned you that just because another website's within your industry, to kind of just be aware that different websites are built differently. Someone else may have a single page site with lots of information on one page and therefore have a very high time on page. Someone else may spread that information across 10 pages. Some web pages may be a single page application, while others may be basic HTML. So there is a benchmarking report directly in Google Analytics where you can use to benchmark your site against others in your industry.
Yeah, so and on top of that, I think if you want to benchmark, if you accurately want to benchmark, it makes sense to benchmark yourself against previous performance. So it'd be quite simple to look at how you're doing against the same day last year, or the previous month, or the same month last year, and that might be a good additional layer on top of the benchmarking report.
Cool, that sounds good. And so the next question is asked by Bar Best, and the question is, how do we measure the influence of mobile UI on offline sales? Right, I think that's a very interesting question, because I think that's again fairly generic in terms of how do you identify digital impact on offline conversion.
Yeah, I'll take that. So one out of 3 mobile searches at the moment is local. So people are massively using mobile to find out what is in and around them. There are different ways in which we provide insight into how you can measure the effect of your mobile site on offline, right? And the most exciting one is actually we launched in Q4. It's called Store Visits within Google Analytics. It's currently live in about 20 markets globally. We're launching quite a few other markets this year, where anybody who's landed on your website, if you have set up Google My Business, you've connected it to Google Ads and Google Ads to GA, then GA is aware of your offline presence, and it actually reports on anybody who's visited your site and has then made it to your offline to any of your stores. So that is a real valuable insight, because you can look at how successful different pages are. You can look at how successful different channels are in sending people via your website to the store. But that's reporting, right? I mean, there's a lot you can do in terms of UX as well, right? Making it easy for people to find the nearest store, offering them any incentive to go into store, making sure that you've got a seamless experience between online and offline. All of that helps. So there is a lot you can do, but it depends a little bit in terms of the reporting that we offer at Google. It depends a little bit on the market you're in. Yeah, Brian, anything to add?
It's a little more advanced, but if you have user IDs, logged in users on your site, we do offline conversion import into GA. So if you have a way that you can tie a particular user on their phone who's logged into their site, and say you're a grocery retailer and they built a shopping cart or a shopping list on their phone, they then later come into your store, they go through and they purchase those items, they tap their little rewards card, which is tied to their user ID, and later you upload that offline conversion and we will stitch that data back together for you.
Thank you, Brian and Michelle. Barbest, I hope that answered your question. Moving on to the next question. So this is asked by Suresh. And Suresh is asking, what do we do if analytics shows us that targeted users are spending high high time and good time, but are not purchasing. So what does that mean, and what are the next steps? So maybe I can take this question because this is more to do with conversion optimization. So Suresh, best is to essentially break down the user step and figure out on which step is the is the drop the highest, right? So that is one way to ensuring that you have like a very very detailed funnel, and funnel analysis that includes steps, includes actions, includes events, includes customer going to the next step, and so on and so forth, right? And doing a deeper analysis on each of these steps, right? There you would want to compare with segments. You would want to compare your organic traffic versus your inorganic traffic, or your search organic traffic versus let's say direct, or let's say marketing traffic. And that will help you guide you in terms of understanding how the different customer segments are behaving, right? Typically we see that organic customers and direct customers convert the best because they're coming there with an intention of performing an action on your website, and hence they should ideally convert the best. So that if you isolate that audience and then break it down further, the next step would be to break it down by devices, break it down by different geographies, break it down by different essentially do as many user cuts as possible, whichever is relevant for your business. And usually the insights emerge out of that, and will help you understand where exactly is the customer dropping off and build a better experience for the customer. Brian and Michelle, would you like to add anything to that?
You want to pin me for a second? I have the funnel report pulled up in GA.
Awesome. Yeah.
I can just kind of highlight some of the things that you were talking about. So this is, it's under e-commerce shopping behavior. So here we can see that out of all sessions, 38,000 of them, 18% of them had no shopping activity. But for those who viewed products, 28% of those didn't add anything to their cart. From those who added something to their cart, 45% never went to checkout. And from the users who went to checkout, 54% of them had no transactions. So because of these, like, you can see that these drop-offs, out of all sessions, we had a large amount of them have no shopping activity at all. So the first thing for the Google Merchandise Store is, I would say we need to investigate why people are coming to our site and then never even viewing a single product. Like, why did you come to an online shopping site if you don't want to look at the products? So to me, one, that's probably a lot of internal testing, but two, that could also mean we've got a marketing problem. Whatever ads that our users are clicking to get here and go, well, that's not really what I wanted. Second, if they're making it through this and they actually go into the checkout process, you can move down to the checkout behavior report. And once this loads, you can now see once they've decided to purchase and they're clicking checkout, where in the process are they leaving? So is it the billing and shipping? Is it the payment? Is it reviewing the order? So this is just the next report that I would look at to try to find out in that purchase funnel, why are your users not purchasing your products?
All right, I think that should wrap it up. We are slightly over time, but thank you so much, guys, for joining in. Thank you, Brian and Michelle, for taking our time out of your busy schedule for this. And I know for a fact that all of our viewers will take a lot of value out of that. So thank you so much, Brian. Just say
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Michelle.
Take care. Bye.
So guys, just before we log out, just a quick reminder. So next week we are going to talk about introduction to A/B testing and A/B testing with Google Optimize. I know a lot of you guys had a lot of questions around what is the best practices for A/B testing and how do you gain insights out of that. So that is the session for you guys. We do it at 1:30 p.m. on Tuesdays, India time, and 4 p.m. Singapore time. So please make sure you guys are joining us. And also, if again, another reminder, if you guys are going to post on social media, please use the hashtag MUX Marathon. And please feel free to share whatever learnings you have had from the session, because that's also feedback for us. And if you guys have not registered, please register with the Mobile UX Marathon website on Think with Google. So that will help us track, and also we'll share relevant information, relevant content, and also the feedback form that please share your feedback with us, so we can come up with better curated and better webinars for you in the future. So with that, we are logging off. Thank you so much, guys, once again for joining us, and I hope you have a great day and a week ahead. Thank you, guys. See ya.